Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel. My name is Colleen Carroll, and I'm a content publishing coordinator at Nexus Marketing and your moderator for today's session. Our topic today is Welcome Aboard, Onboarding New Association Members, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. As usual, before we jump in and get started, I do have a few quick logistics to cover. Today's hour-long panel will include time both for questions curated by my team and questions from you all, our fantastic audience. So at any time during the panel, please feel free to submit your questions via the questions tab, and we'll address as many as we possibly can. So again, at any time during the session, no matter what we're currently talking about, feel free to start getting those questions in, and then we'll fit as many as we can in. If at any point you're having any technical difficulties, please let us know via the chat. My colleague Malou is under the Team NX Unite username and will do her best to assist. So give a little holler in the chat, let us know what's happening, and we'll try to figure out how to get you on and enjoying the session as fast as possible. I did also want to say that this panel session is being recorded. So at any point, if you are thinking that this insight is just so fantastic that you need to hear it a second time, that's wonderful. It's going to automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session. Just give it a few minutes and it will be there. It will also continue to be accessible on the NX Unite website in the on-demand panel section. So if you have any friends in the industry who you're like, can't believe they missed it, they needed to be there, that session was perfect for them, feel free to share that same landing page that you used to sign up and they'll be able to access the recording. All right, very quickly, I do want to speak to what is NX Unite? What is this organization that has brought us here? NX Unite is made in partnership with Nexus Marketing, and the NX Unite mission is to make introductions that lead to lasting relationships and serve as a hub for connection in the mission-driven sector. As you saw in our video on NX Unite, you can find upcoming industry events, suggested influencers to follow, trusted solutions, cause-driven podcasts, and of course, panels with experts such as these lovely folks here with me today. Before I do official introductions to our panelists, my one final note is I just want to give a really big thank you to our audience. Whether you are joining us live or you're watching the recording a week from now, a month from now, a few months from now, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. I hope this panel is beneficial. Hope you learned something. Hope you'll join us for future NX Unite panels. We have a ton of them planned. And also hope that if you are joining us live, you will submit those questions so we can make sure to address the topics relevant to you. All right, to begin with the introductions, I'd first like to introduce Ethan Gray, who is the Director of Association Management Services at Tally. He has been in the nonprofit sector for his entire career, beginning with post-college terms as a VISTA volunteer in service to America and AmeriCorps member working for regional community development organizations. An association manager since 2006, he has worked in both the AMC and standalone environments and has extensive experience in membership, governance, and infrastructure development. Glad to have you, Ethan.
Great to be here. I appreciate it.
Definitely. Also here with us today is Leona Scott, who is the president and founder at JEP Marketing Communications. She helps associations and small businesses build profitable content to get and keep members and customers. Leona founded JEP Marketing Communications in 2018 after having worked for several national trade and professional associations in North Texas, both as an editor and as a managing marketing and communications teams. Glad to have you, Leona.
Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course. And finally, here with us today is Tony Hoff, who is the marketing director of Survey and Ballot Systems. He oversees company communications, branding, product launches, and ensuring SBS website is the leading source of voting and governance information for member organizations. In addition, Tony partners with clients to plan and manage successful projects that increase member engagement and voter participation. Glad to have you, Tony.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we are going to jump in and get started. Very quickly, I do want to recognize that our fourth panelist, Morgan Wood of Hivebright, is no longer able to join us for this session. Luckily, we're going to get her set up on a future panel, so if you were hoping to hear from Morgan, never fear, we will hear from her shortly, I'm sure. All right, jumping in and getting started, Ethan, I'm going to have you start us off with our very first question. How have best practices related to member onboarding changed over the past 5 years, and what lessons have we learned?
Great question to kick it off. I think, generally we're seeing kind of continued adaptation to the changing landscape that membership organizations have been reacting to for many decades. And what I mean by that is an increasingly diverse constituency with increasingly diverse expectations. And most recently, I think often those expectations include desiring more influence themselves over the relationships they are having with the organizations. I think we have seen onboarding attempt to be more customized, be more reactive to individual preferences. Specifically, I've also seen a shift in associations attempting to learn from how corporations or the for-profit community are interacting with the customer, especially in the digital space. The Amazon experience might sound a bit dated as a reference point, but it is still really useful. Interactions that are based on the behavior of the end user.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ethan. Leona, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this same question. How have practices changed in the last 5 years, and what have we learned?
Well, I think there's a lot more information that's available to associations today. I see a lot more research happening when it comes to member engagement. For instance, there's a book that just recently came out by Amanda Kaiser called Elevating Engagement, and I would highly recommend it. But she really goes into the nitty gritty about, onboarding sequences that associations are doing currently. And to what Ethan was talking about in terms of like feedback, uh, for associations, I've seen associations be more intentional in getting feedback from new members, specifically like why they joined. They're trying to collect that kind of information, and what are some of the resources that they're looking forward to participating in with that organization, or how they heard about that organization and why did they join, that kind of information. So I've seen associations be a lot more engaging with their new members to get that feedback. So that helps them to give them what they need in terms of resources.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Leona. All right, Tony, we want to hear from you as well. How has onboarding changed in the last 5 years?
Yeah, I would say it's been a digitalization of the process over the last few years. I mean, even going back to the beginning of that time span, most things were online, from sign up and events and resources that associations were providing. But over the last several years, we all went through a global change where hybrid events, virtual events really became the norm and the way business got done. And associations were really quick to adapt to that and accommodating to meet their members where they are. I think with the organizations that we work with, we're seeing them be very successful by planting those seeds as to what it means to be a member and really leaning in on governance. So from a voting and candidate nomination standpoint, a lot of organizations that we work with are seeing success by making sure that members understand that they have a voice in their organization from beginning to the end, and really encouraging members to become active. So whether that's in working groups, whether that's in committees or running for the board or even voting in annual elections, it's become a part of who they are. And so what have they learned in that? It's, well, if you weren't interacting digitally before, you absolutely have to now, and you have to continue to meet your members where they are. And I kind of chuckle at that buzzword, meeting people where they are, because everybody says that these days, but it rings so true. Be making sure that you're communicating and interacting with your members on platforms that they're currently using, and also looking ahead. I think a couple of years ago, none of us had heard of what TikTok was. And I'm not saying that associations need to be out dancing, making videos that will trend, but just the importance of making sure that you understand that your members' time is very competitive. And so distractions are everywhere, inboxes are flooding. And so making sure that you're relevant and communicating with your members on how they prefer in those channels is going to help set them up for success.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tony. All right, we are off to a great start. Very quickly, I'm going to let our audience know that we do have a poll that's gone live. If you want to let us know your experience with the last 5 years, we asked how different are your association's onboarding practices today in comparison to 5 years ago. So far, there is an even split between vastly different, fairly different, and mostly the same. So let's see if that continues. I see some of you are finding the poll now. All right, Leona, I'm going to bring the next question over to you first. For those who may be just beginning to build a member onboarding strategy, what advice do you have? Where do they start, and what should they be on the lookout for?
So I would highly recommend that. I think any good onboarding strategy needs to start with the membership department as well as your marketing communications teams. So often I find association departments working in silos. So I would recommend, bringing them together and really spending some time, uh, you know, putting yourself in the shoes of a new member and really, what are they seeing? What are they hearing? What are they experiencing? What does their day look like, kind of thing. And really, just think through a new member experience. And so I think that's a really good first step, is getting together between the membership department and your marketing communications teams, because your membership department is they are engaging with your new members, on a day-to-day basis, and they're, fielding questions and talking to them. So they're really hearing from them. And your marketing communications teams can put your messaging together and, all of your communications pieces. So it's a partnership.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Leona. Tony, over to you. Thoughts on how to kind of think about it when we're just starting off on an onboarding strategy? Was I muted? Tony, over to you.
No, I apologize. I
No?
kind of lost you all for a second, but I think I got the gist of it. So the question was, if you're just starting out, where to begin? And I think for me, I would say where to start is that user experience. Where do new members find you? How do they sign up? What does that first interaction look like? Because if that is complex or clunky, there's a high likelihood that you're going to lose people before they even join. And it's the easier you can make the sign up process, the better off you are from the start. And that also sets expectations for your interactions for your members right away. I would say look at the value propositions of your association, what sets you apart from others. And once you have those key principles, you have to communicate those over and over and over again while delivering those top-rate resources and services to your members. Once you have that buyer journey and the communication, or at least the value props set out, then it's building out a communication plan and knowing when and how you're going to communicate with your members. It's important to know that when someone signs up as a new member, you don't want to overload them with too much information too fast. So steady communication with concise messaging is best practice. We have a lot of clients that do the 5-for-5 model, which is they have a series of 5 emails that are sent over the course of 5 weeks. And if you're already doing something similar and looking to expand on that, we've recommended to some of our clients that they maybe start by doubling that or even tripling that. That might sound like an awful big jump to go from 5 to maybe 15 emails. And some of our clients said, well, where do you get content ideas and things like that? And I like to look at the data. What does your website tell you? What pages are having the most interaction? If you're doing email newsletters, what topics have the most open and click rates and things like that? And when it comes to a welcome series, if you are consistently communicating what value you bring as an organization and able to do that concisely and crisply, that's going to go a long way with your members and making sure that they not only enjoy the onboarding experience, but become active within your organization.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Tony. All right, Ethan, I think you know what questions coming your way. Any advice for those just starting out with an onboarding strategy?
Well, first, I'd just like to say, Leona, I appreciated the comments about integrating departments, integrating internal stakeholders who can inform the process, because I do think that often gets overlooked. And Tony, just underscoring the importance of that first impression, because I think that's obviously a key theme, and so many things cascade from that. Additionally, I'd say don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions about what components the onboarding strategy should key in on. try and leverage data to inform your understanding of what your members or customers want or need. Start with existing data, data that you have at your fingertips, or hopefully have at your fingertips. That might be limited to demographic information, which might not paint the most accurate picture of kind of the personality of your members or your prospective members. And if you don't have what you feel is a complete enough picture, ask questions. Ask questions of your current members to build a better understanding of who your constituents are. So you can make sure that you're calling out the most appropriate things during that onboarding process. And then, consider testing the environment. Maybe join other organizations, document what you like or dislike about their process, and bring in intel from outside the nonprofit community. What do you as a consumer like or dislike about the relationships you have with corporations or the companies that you buy products from?
Wonderful. Thank you, Ethan. Very quickly, going back to that poll, 38% of you said that mostly your onboarding practices are the same, but with some upgrades. 31% said fairly different, but with some noticeable similarities. 23% said vastly different, and 8% said pretty much the same. So we are totally across the board in terms of where we are today in comparison to 5 years ago, which is great. Tony, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. If associations intend to review and update their current onboarding practices, what should they be on the lookout for? How can they effectively evaluate and identify strategic ways to move forward?
Before I answer that, can I pass it back to Leona real quick? I saw she was looking to maybe piggyback on something Ethan said.
Oh, definitely. So sorry to miss that, Leona.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And thank you, Tony, so much for seeing that in the chat. To Ethan's point about, just your data should drive your decisions and your onboarding strategy, I can't agree more. Something else that I like to do is go back and actually there's a lot of value in engaging with your members, whether they're your new members or even like your board members or longtime members, and circle back with them and ask them, hey, what would you have liked to have known when you first joined the organization? Because that will reveal a lot in what you can put into your onboarding strategy. For instance, I often see longtime members saying, I wish I had joined the online community in my organization, more quickly, because I didn't realize, what a great resource that was. So just, engaging with your longtime members and, really asking them questions about, hey, what would you have found useful, and developing that into your onboarding strategy is in your welcome series is really helpful.
Thank you so much. Sorry to have missed that in the chat, Leona. Glad you jumped in, and thank you, Tony, for calling that out.
Not a problem. So what could they do to update their current practices? I think the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask for help or from input from others. A lot of organizations are chock full of professionals. We're all very good at what we do, but I tell my team every day, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. And sometimes you have to be open to that. You have to embrace that diversity in your advisory group, be it your senior leadership team, be it your staff, be it your membership. And so if you're looking for ways to refine that process, just know that you likely don't have all the answers in that. You're going to need support from others in your organization with different thoughts, backgrounds, ideas. My advice to a lot of organizations is that if you're looking for more of a formal group to help advise you in that, start an onboarding committee and make sure that they're tasked with understanding that new members receive the proper attention that they need in that first year or two of membership. For a lot of organizations, they'll take that to mean that this committee should be an elected position. Maybe they hold a call for nominations where they're looking for a certain set of credentials from the folks who are going to work on this committee. So it could be number of years of membership, certain experience in the field, things like that. And then task that committee with setting out benchmarks and retention rates and have them actively pursue those. Now, if you're not looking for something so formal, you could always as Leona was mentioning, getting feedback from other members of your organization. A lot of member associations have like hot pockets of members who are very active. Engage that group, find out why they are so passionate about your organization. What is it that makes them tick? And is there a way to learn from them so that you can have new members feel that same level of passion and energy when it comes to your organization?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tony. Ethan, over to you. Thoughts on how we can effectively and efficiently evaluate and identify ways to improve our current practices?
Yeah, I mean, again, the first impression kind of theme, the member experience, I think starts in many ways from the onboarding experience. Theoretically, though, if someone has made a decision to join, they already have some familiarity with what your organization is and what value they might derive from membership. I think we're hearing a lot about not making decisions in silos and inviting broad perspectives into how we all make decisions. And also, again, I think we are seeing a changing landscape that brings the end user or the customer or the member has the expectations to influence their relationship. So I think we should be open to considering different onboarding scenarios. Does somebody want a series of emails to familiarize themselves with the organization? Do they want a one-page kind of reference doc? Might they want to watch a YouTube video, a short YouTube video, or do they want a kind of high-touch phone call? So I think allowing the member to drive potentially, if you are in somewhat of an assessment or an evaluation phase, and then perhaps that allows you to arrive at either a curated process based on that feedback, or you potentially arrive at multiple onboarding options for the member to choose from that could end up being a fairly low lift to facilitate.
Great, thank you so much. Leona, final thoughts from you on this topic of how we can review our current onboarding practices.
Yeah, I really liked Ethan's point about, he mentioned, a variety of tactics that associations can use. Something that he may not have mentioned is I've seen that more and more associations are using quarterly webinars where they have member orientations, for their organization. And that's a really great way to connect with your new members, maybe even have some longtime members as part of that orientation and, just share their stories of the value that they find in belonging to the organization, maybe giving them some tips and tricks about, how to get the most out of your membership. The most recent statistic I saw, this was from Dynamic Benchmarking, that about, let me make sure, I've got my notes in front of me. I want to make sure I'm quoting everything correctly, that 38% of associations that participated in Dynamic Benchmarking's new member engagement study host new member virtual events quarterly. And that they find that very, effective, highly effective. So I just wanted to add that if your association has not already experimented with some kind of new member orientation, that's definitely something to look into, because other associations have had great success with that.
Great, thank you so much, Leona. Very quickly, I see in the chat someone has asked if this session is being recorded. Good news, it is being recorded, and it'll automatically be in your email inbox at the end of the session, so you can go back and see everything we've talked about so far. Just want to encourage our audience one more time to please submit questions for our panelists. I can be selfish and ask all of my own questions, but I would actually rather ask your all's questions so that the topics are relevant to you and your team. So if there's anything that any of this conversation is inspiring in you, any questions that you've never had answered related to this topic, please feel free to submit them and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. Otherwise, I'll be selfish, and that's okay too. All right. Ethan, I'll have you start us off with our next question. What onboarding mistakes have you seen associations make, and how can our associations on this call avoid them?
I think mistake number one would be not having an onboarding process. I think we all conceptualize that retaining a member should be easier than acquiring a member. So if we're not differentiating between the new member and the renewing member profile, I think that's a missed opportunity. Not to say that a renewing member is less important than a brand new one, but that first impression and the acclimation experience, I do think needs to be distinct. Mistake number two, either not asking for feedback about the onboarding experience or collecting feedback and then doing nothing with it. If you do have feedback loops or opportunities for new members to describe their experience, but you don't have a business owner for following up on that input or a processor following up on that input, what good is it? It's no good.
I think we have all had times where we realize we're collecting feedback and that we haven't done anything with it. So definitely important advice. Thank you so much, Ethan. Leona, I'd love to hear your thoughts on mistakes that we should avoid as well.
So to Ethan's point about, collecting feedback, and so I think it's really important in especially your email series, your welcome series to your new members, is to not speak, at them, but to have a two-way conversation, and build your email campaigns in a way where you are asking them questions and really trying to engage them, in a two-way conversation. Because so oftentimes, and I've made this mistake so many times early when I was putting, engagement campaigns together, is, just spewing out the information and not making it a two-way conversation, and really getting some feedback from them, maybe even including like a poll in there, or even just, what is your biggest challenge that you are facing right now in your job? So just asking questions in your email series, your welcome series, is one of the best tips that I can give.
Fantastic. All right, Tony, over to you. Any mistakes we haven't already talked about?
The two that I have are very closely related, and it's kind of funny, in my opinion. One is overloading members with too much information too fast. There's a lot of excitement when someone first joins the organization, and they may be joining for a variety of reasons, but giving them way too much information that just overloads their inbox, or basically it becomes something that they're not necessarily paying attention to because there's just far too much. And then the other end of that spectrum is not doing enough communication. So you've got to find that fine balance between the two, where if it's just a handful of interactions right after they sign up or become a member, and then poof, it's basically on the member for them to interact from there on, that can also lead to some disengagement and lower retention rates. I think the kind of collective that we've all said is it's really important that those first few months, or even before that, those first few interactions are highly important, and getting feedback from new members on that process is just a critical way to make sure that they feel engaged and welcome to the organization right from the get-go.
Definitely. Thank you, Tony. Leona, I'm going to have you start us off with our next question. I think we all know that association professionals are busy. I hear that on every call that I am on. Do you have any advice for small changes associations could make today for their strategy that could have a big impact on member onboarding?
Yes, of course. I think one of the biggest, or one of the smallest ways that they can, be effective is, if they don't already have an email series, to get one put together. And it could be as simple as like, a 3 email campaigns where they are intentionally welcoming, their members, and, maybe even including like some FAQs, or asking them, just a simple question like, why did you decide to join our organization? So having an actual, welcome series is, I think, one of the simplest ways to get started.
Definitely. Thank you, Leona. Tony, over to you. Any thoughts on small changes with big impacts? Did I freeze for anyone? Tony, over to you. Any changes?
I'm sorry,
small changes with big
I apologize.
impacts?
My mic kind of cut out. Could you repeat that?
Yeah, of course. We're looking for small changes that could potentially have big impacts for associations when it comes to their onboarding strategies, potentially ones that aren't going to be overwhelming, but could be implemented pretty quickly.
Sure. Thank you for that. I think one of the things that we've all mentioned in a variety of the different questions was asking for feedback. I loved what Ethan said then too, is actually taking action on that. So it's one thing to ask for it and get that data back from either your new members or existing members, but you also have to have a plan in place to take action on whatever feedback that might be. Do you need to increase communication? Do you need to increase the types of communication or the types of resources that you're providing? And that feedback is an ongoing process. It's not necessarily just a one-time deal. So as you commit to that and figure out, hey, we want to make sure that we're learning as much as we can about the onboarding process, just know that it's not going to be an overnight success. You have to commit to it and then ultimately take that action.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. Ethan, over to you. Small changes with big impacts.
Yeah, I think, consider tweaking the approach or kind of the language that you use in onboarding. Focus more on describing the membership experience rather than, simply itemizing a list of benefits. I think something simple as explaining to people that they are becoming part of an exclusive community, which resonates differently than telling someone that they get a discount on products. Just sticking with the feedback theme, downstream touch points, opportunities for input or feedback that say to the new member, we're still thinking about you, beyond that initial dues transaction. Quick 1, 2, maybe 3 question pulse surveys that aren't onerous to participate in and give staff, a rapid indicator of satisfaction or dissatisfaction. Think about acknowledgments, the note as the member is approaching their first year anniversary or as they participate in specific activities, to let them know that you appreciate them. And then, under all of that is consider, exploring technology that can help automate some of these communications. Like certainly there's financial investments to consider, with technological platforms, but there are also, long-term efficiencies that can be gained and that can limit the impact or the burden on staff.
Great. Thank you so much, Ethan. I'm going to officially switch over to our audience questions. We had some questions submitted via registration, but I will prioritize live audience questions if any come in. But we'll stick with the registration ones for now. Ethan, I'll have you start us off with this first question. Someone mentioned that they're particularly aware that in their industry, people are really, really busy and they don't want to take up too much time with the onboarding process. Any advice about getting people onboarded successfully, but not taking up too much of their time?
Yeah, I think we've touched on a couple of possible, examples or resources, and I think it's make things self-service. The comments about those webinars, regular webinars that allow somebody to have a touch point on a schedule that works for them is something that I think is a good thing to consider. And also, the different media, whether it's something that's static, like here's welcome to membership, thank you for paying your dues, here's your receipt, and here's a reference, here's some reference material that you can refer to whenever you have the time, or that YouTube video that is always up there and accessible for them. Anything I think that is self-service and again allows the member to control how they interact, I think is appreciated by busy professionals.
Absolutely. Leona, anything you would want to add in terms of advice for people who are particularly concerned about taking up too much time?
Yeah, I would love to see more associations using texting, with their members, because I think that can be, effective. Of course, you don't want to, overly use it, but I think definitely in welcoming new members, I think there's a place for that, and Or even just, if you see, for example, that they haven't logged into their online community, and just, reaching out to them, intentionally with, some kind of email, or even, just a phone call where they can leave a voicemail, kind of thing. But, I think just being a little bit more intentional, and also being creative in some of your communication methods, like texting.
Great. Tony, anything you want to add? Otherwise, I'll have you start us off with our next question.
No, I think they got those covered. Fire away for the next one.
Perfect. We had a question come in essentially saying they have a hard time changing their onboarding because there's a sense of we've always done it this way. It's worked in the past. We've always done it this way. We don't want to risk messing something up. Anything you'd particularly want to share with people who maybe across the board are struggling with getting team members kind of all in agreement that it's time for a change?
Oh boy. I would say don't be afraid to be a change agent. We all have, and I'm not saying you have to be radically changing what you're doing, but I think sometimes organizations will rely on this is the way it's always been done because that's familiar, that's easy. And if you yourself are open to new ideas or new ways to communicate, sometimes it's just, so we're not going to revamp the entire onboarding process, but let's try this one new channel, or let's try this one new process, and then come back with your data points and say, here's why this was effective, or here's why it wasn't effective, and maybe we can try something else. So the most dangerous words in many organizations is this is the way it's always been done. We want to make sure that you're respecting the way things have been done, but also open to making sure that it's evolving with modern technology, your members' preferences, and also the members of the future, how they expect you to operate and interact with them.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Ethan, anything you would want to add to this idea of we've always done it this way and we're having a hard time getting team members on board?
I really appreciate what Tony said about just not being afraid of change. Change is inevitable, and it's often very, very necessary. I do think there is a difference between if it ain't broke, don't fix it versus we've always done it that way. But you're not going to know if something's broken again if you don't have feedback. If you're making decisions in a vacuum, or you're considering things in a vacuum without the insight from your members or your primary customers, then you're missing out. So I do think you got to invite that into the discussion table or the decision-making table. And again, Tony made the comment, meet your members where they are. I think that applies to, the channels that they live on, the digital channels that they live on, but also the way that they want to interact with you. And if you don't ask those questions, and if you're afraid of change because you've always done it a certain way and that feels safe and comfortable, you're not gonna be able to evolve, and you're not gonna be able to innovate.
Leona, would you like to add on to this question, or would you like to start us off with our next one?
Sure, I'd like to add on to that because, it's so easy to not try new ideas. But I think that's where, especially if you're, in a community where you're with other similar organizations, and you're seeing what works for one organization, may work for your organization. So don't be afraid to try new ideas. And I'll give you an example. It's really timely right now. One of the organizations that I'm involved with, and I actually volunteer for this organization, it's the Dallas-Fort Worth chapter of ASAE. And we're getting ready for our annual conference. And we are actually going to have a first-timers kind of buddy system this year at our annual convention. And it's something new. It's something that I've seen other organizations have great success with. And we set it up very simply, where your seasoned member is paired with a first timer to our organization, and we're asking them to just engage with them once before the event starts, and then maybe join them, meet up with them like right before the event starts at the actual physical event, and join them for like our awards luncheon, and maybe attend a session with them. And those are just because what we found is our annual conference is a very high value conference for our members, and so we want to invest the resources to reach out to those first timers and give them a great welcome experience. And so that's just one example that we're going to try, just because we've seen other organizations have great success with it. So don't be afraid to try something new and get ideas from other organizations in your community.
Great, thank you, Leona. I have a follow-up question for you that's in reflection of a poll that we put out. We asked, what are you looking for today? And 63% of people said innovative ideas that their team could aspire to. So it seems like people are ready and excited to try something new, or potentially consider trying something new. So for those that are ready to think big and think innovative, what advice do you have? Any kind of particular direction you would want to steer people?
I don't think enough associations are looking at their data and really analyzing, how many of their new members are engaging with the organization. I think there's so much data out there that shows that if your new members are not engaging, if they're not signing up for a webinar, if they're not attending an event, if they're not opening up your email campaigns within the first 90 days, more likely, they're not going to be renewing when they get their renewal after 12 months. So I think just really looking at your data, knowing your data, and really targeting those at-risk members, I think will pay off in the long run for an association. But I think so often we wear so many hats in an organization, especially nonprofits, and we don't stop long enough to look at the data, because the data can be so revealing, as the other panelists have said over and over again, and just really target some of those at-risk members and go after them with some intentional touch points.
Great, thank you so much, Leona. Tony, any thoughts on big innovative ideas people could aspire to?
I really liked what Leona said earlier about text messaging. So as a professional and as a parent with 3 kids and sports and school and activities, sometimes if you don't text me, I'm going to miss the message. And I think that for a long time, the cell phone was really sacred for a lot of folks. Like, oh, we don't want to text, we don't want to do that. There are a lot of rules and regs. Don't get me wrong with mass text messaging, but for organizations, if you're running an event, for example, maybe you have that annual meeting and you're looking to make sure that people are aware of certain tracks within that event, or something going on that's very pertinent, it's a great way to reach folks. So text messaging is a good channel. Like Leona said, you got to be careful so you're not sending a text message every day, because then it would just become irrelevant. But I think that would be a good new channel for a lot of organizations to explore if it's a good fit for your membership.
Great, thank you, Tony. Ethan, anything you want to add? Otherwise, you can start us off with the next question.
I mean, I'll just underscore the diversity of the vehicle, how the information arrives at the end user, and don't be afraid to do, especially particularly to onboarding. Don't be afraid to have multiple options for the member to choose from. How do you want to communicate with the organization during the onboarding process? And again, we'll meet you where your preference is.
Fantastic. I have a follow-up question to that I think aligns pretty well based on my understanding. Someone in registration asked kind of how should onboarding be different for someone who's maybe early in their career versus maybe more senior in their career but is just joining the association? Any thoughts on whether there should be a difference between that onboarding process?
I think that's an excellent question. And that's one where you might get tripped up by making assumptions about the preferences based on where a person is or the demographic characteristics of that individual, based on where they are in their career. So I don't want to get too far down the track, but I would say that it is likely that somebody whose early career is going to have different needs than somebody who is later in their career. You're only going to validate that again by asking questions and having a feedback loop for new members that either again legitimizes what your assumptions are or challenges them. So I think again that's important, but making sure, I think Leona made a comment earlier about, we receive information, or we might receive information about, I wish I had known about benefit X when I onboarded, because that has become the most valuable thing about membership. So you need to zero in on those kinds of things, and then adequately be able to house your data to be able to profile those members. If you can't tell somebody is early career versus middle career or late career, you got to figure that out. And again, have the data to be able to mine that information, and then ask questions that allow you to make those links.
Fantastic. Leona, anything you would want to add in terms of early career versus later career, or even, I know there's a lot of talk about different generations and how we're engaging different generations.
Yeah, so I think, we've talked a lot about just the advantages of having some kind of welcome series. But if you want to take that a step further, so say you're an association and you've had great success with the welcome series. So maybe consider, like, the next level is consider like segmenting your welcome series to, those early career professionals, and then maybe mid-career, and then the senior level. So I think that would be, if especially if your association database system can, decipher that information and you've got that data, that would be an excellent way, is to segment your welcome series according to those different levels of members.
Great. Tony, anything you want to add in terms of variation between an early career or a later career onboarding process?
I think they both hit the nail on the head. And if you're able to provide resources or a track depending on where they are or what's most important to them, any way you can personalize that onboarding process that's going to make it user-centric is going to set you apart than your competitors, than other associations, than other organizations, or frankly, any other company that's out there, because often you're getting a stock track once you onboard whatever it might be, whether it's software or basically anything. So yeah, if you can personalize it based on preferences, that's fantastic.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tony. Very quickly, I want to call out that there's some great conversation happening in the chat with people giving ideas of how they are handling their new members. Carol recommended a newcomers welcome party, and people said that was a ton of fun. We also had a welcome reception with speed dating as a suggestion with the board members, where new members went from table to table that were manned by board members so they could talk about various topics and get to know people. And apparently it was a ton of fun, and I love all of these ideas. So thank you all so much for participating in the chat. Unfortunately, we actually are getting towards the end of our hour, which is a little bit hard to imagine. And so I want to make sure we hear from each of our panelists one final time. So I have a final question for the whole group. I'm going to admit that it's a pretty big and broad question to end on, but it's one I'm also really excited to hear your thoughts on. And Tony, I'll have you start us off. What do you see as the future of membership onboarding, and how can associations really get ahead today?
I would say automation and AI. We all are probably hearing buzz of GPT chat and how that's going to change this, that, or the other thing. But I think that based on what everyone has shared today about having some sort of automation to your process, whether it's email, whether it's events and things like that, that is really going to be what's going to drive you and propel you forward. The caveat to that is just don't set it and forget it. You've got to solicit feedback. You've got to analyze what's working, what's not, and then course correct as need be. So those are kind of the big ones. But as always, just think of it as a living, breathing process. It's not just here's what it is and here's what will always be as far as onboarding goes.
Great. Thank you so much, Tony. Leona, over to you. Thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Well, I've already started seeing more and more associations use their online communities to really engage with their new members. And it can start simply just by welcoming them in their online communities, but then also having specific, just a smaller communities within that community just for those new members. So then they feel comfortable asking, kind of in smaller, more intimate settings, questions that they have about, whether it's their career, even just the association, or, what kind of volunteer opportunities, that kind of thing. But I think I think it's an exciting time to see more and more associations using their online communities to engage with their new members and really build that community.
Definitely agree that it's very exciting time, and I'm really looking forward to the future. Ethan, ready to hear your thoughts on the future and how we can get ahead today?
Yeah, I think one automation and AI, the comments around that are really important. That really facilitates or should facilitate a fluid process to react to member behavior, which I think is the present and also the future. I think how can associations get ahead? Appropriately allocate resources to onboarding as a business imperative. Where I think associations often get stuck is struggling with resource management and how you direct things appropriately to priorities, and recognizing not everything can be priority number one or priority number 1A. You really have to focus on resources. And again, more and more, I think individuals are asking themselves, how does this interaction or how does this relationship make me feel? And if that answer is positive, then the individual is going to keep coming back. I think onboarding should be conceptualized kind of in the same way that, acquisition, advertising, and marketing is conceptualized. So if it's identified as a priority by the organization, then you got to resource it accordingly.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ethan. All right, with that, we have reached the end of our panel. I want to give a big thank you to our panelists. I know if we were in an in-person setting, there'd be a round of applause. So just know that I'm sending that to you emotionally through the screen today. I do also want to give a big thank you to our audience, whether you joined us live or you're watching the recording. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. I hope you will attend future NX Unite panels. We have a packed spring of panels ahead of us with a lot of panels specific to the association world. So keep your eye out for things related to marketing, member engagement, acquiring new members, and more. So keep your eye out on the NX Unite website, NX Unite LinkedIn, or you can even find me on LinkedIn, and I'll make sure that you're up to date on everything that is happening. Do also quickly want to say that if you are planning on attending future NX Unite panels, I highly recommend making a free NX Unite account. My reason for this suggestion is this means that when you attend future panels, you're going to start earning what's called cause coins. When you amass enough of those on NX Unite, you're going to be able to redeem some rewards that include discounts on industry software, some free consultations with some of our friends in the industry. So if you're going to be spending a few hours with us here anyway, joining us for future panels, I just want you to get that extra benefit with the free account. All right, that is it for me. Again, a huge thank you to our panelists and to our audience. I hope you all have a nice rest of your day and really appreciate your all's time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Colleen.